Can't get enough sports shorts? Tune into Sports Shorts TV on Cox HD Channel 1013 Mondays at 8, Tuesdays at 9, and ETEL Channel 4. That's 52 weeks a year to get educated on sports by the best. Joel Davis and Ronnie Rance.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Sports Shorts presented by LaBerge Casino. Ronnie Rance here with you. No Joel Davis, but we do have a special guest, and the state championship head coach of the Dunham Tigers, Jonathan Pixley, who joins us after winning a state title for the first time in 20 years over at Dunham.
Second time
in 20 years. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, when was the other?
We won it 3 years ago, so we've won 2 of the last 3.
This past state championship will be one that, regardless of how old you live to, you'll always remember. Not that you won't ever forget any of the other state championships, but to win by 1 against your rival Episcopal in a game where there were no fans in the stands, not your average state championship, to say the least.
Craziest scenario ever, because it went from, we had played Newman in the semifinals just a couple days earlier, and, really good crowd. But we had to pre-sell tickets for the state championship game, especially being that it was Episcopal, and we were going to be over max capacity for sure. It went from being what would have been unquestionably the biggest athletic event in the history of our campus, on our campus, to kind of a glorified scrimmage is what it felt like. It was kind of crazy, but we were still playing for a state championship.
Well, we'll get to the story of the state championship game in a minute, but I want to first kind of tell folks, kind of who you are and your story. And you grew up in Baton Rouge, went to Catholic High, and that's kind of interesting that Dunham's head football coach and basketball coach both are Catholic High graduates. Of course, Neil Weiner over at Dunham, whose dad was Dale Weiner. But you were at Catholic High, and I was telling you off air before we came on, as good as Catholic High has been in so many sports, won state championships in football and basketball, in baseball and track and everything else, that elusive state title in basketball, but you were a part of arguably the best Catholic High basketball team ever, undefeated during the regular season, and just came up a little short in the top 28.
Yeah, we were, I don't think many people would question that we were probably the most talented team that Catholics ever had. 32-0 up until
what year was that, by the way?
So that's 1992. Mm-hmm. So we're actually ranked like 23rd. They used to do the USA Today top 20, and so we were the 3rd team mentioned in the
receiving votes.
Right.
right.
And so we were a highly ranked team. We beat everybody there was to beat in the state just about at that point, and we had played John Ehret twice earlier that year and beat him by double figures both times, and went to the PMAC back whenever the Final Four used to be there, which I still think it should be there, but nonetheless, and just approached the game the wrong way and ended up losing on a tip-in and didn't get to seal the deal, which I think there was no question we were the best team in the state that year, but for one night we weren't.
Kind of interesting that you guys played the state semifinal at LSU in your hometown. I'm sure it was packed to the gills with Catholic High supporters and fans, but yet you guys weren't able to take advantage of that adrenaline and that focus. It was John Ehret who was that night. I'm sure, because I've got a similar story. Went to Menard High in Alexandria, lost on a tip-in my junior year. When same kind of scenario. You don't forget about it, even though you go on in life and you do all these other things, and you've had a lot of success as a coach. I'm sure there's times where man, what would we have done differently?
Well, of course. You approach it differently. I even remember practice before the game. We didn't take it seriously enough, and Coach Rando, and Coach Kelly kept telling us, "You guys better come ready to play. They're ready to knock you off." And ironically, last year, season before last, I had what I felt like was the most talented team in the state for sure in 2A, and we get to the state finals after we had beaten Country Day by a significant amount earlier in the season, and I told them the exact story that I'm telling you right now, and I don't think my guys took it to heart, and we ended up losing a close one in the state finals, and definitely felt like, again, we were the best team in the state, but we didn't play that way for the game that truly mattered.
Right, yeah, and basketball, hey, it's one game and you're done. It's not a baseball series or anything like that. So you finish your career at Catholic High, and you're looking at your college options. your college story, you took some visits. Tell the folks where you took your visits and who you were deciding between and where you ended up.
So, coming out of high school, I wasn't a high major recruit. I was more of a mid-level Division I recruit. And so I took visits to Davidson, where Steph Curry ended up. I took a visit to Air Force, to Tulane, and a visit to Samford University, which is where I ended up. And Coach Brady, who ended up at LSU.
Yeah, John Brady was the head coach at Samford who recruited you, right?
Correct. And ironically, one of his selling points to me was he promised me we would play LSU before I graduated. And sure enough, we got to play LSU. And so, I ended up, and I guess we'll get to that story in a little bit. But
how many times, did people over the years, especially back then when you were talking to your friends or whatever, and people were going, well, hey, where's Jonathan at? And they're like, oh, he's playing basketball at Samford. Did they think Stanford?
Always.
How many times did you have to correct people? It's not Stanford in Palo Alto, California. It's Samford in Birmingham.
Always. And the worst part about it was they would say, really, Stanford? And then I would say, no, it's Samford. They go, oh. Right. But we ended up having a great run whenever I was there. But, I had to do that a lot.
So John Brady, for those that, maybe forgot, he's over at Samford. He had the great relationship that's well known with Joe Dean and the Dean family, and which gave him the opportunity to end up at LSU. But at a time after Dale Brown, but yeah, good teams. I mean, John did some good things over at Samford. You guys had some good teams. It's well known when he got to LSU how John was for 10 years as the basketball coach. Very intense, no nonsense guy. Put the earplugs in when you go to practice. He's But you got him when he was younger and hungrier. I imagine it was even worse when he was at Samford.
Well, he would say things like, first practice of the year, he'd walk up to me, Pixley, you're going to win 20 games for me this year so I can get the heck out of here. And, half joking, half not.
Oh, yeah,
right?
not very serious.
Look, he had aspirations, which he obviously achieved, but very, very intense. The best defensive coach I've ever played for, and he, a lot of people say, well, defense is easy to coach. Not whenever you don't have great athletes, which we didn't have a bunch of great athletes at Samford, but we're able to defend people because of our concepts and schemes. And he expected the absolute best out of you. And, during the time I played for him, I didn't always understand that, right? And a lot of times he would take things out on me, A, because he knew I could take it, and B, because he felt like if I were the best or one of the best players on the team and I dealt with it, then nobody else had any excuses. Kind of similar to what Greg Popovich has done with Tim Duncan, And so after having become a coach, I understand a lot more. Sure. And have certainly used a lot of what he taught me as a player now as a coach.
John Brady in the mid-'90s, I imagine, you were a guy who had the intestinal fortitude with your background and where you went to high school and all that sort of thing, prepared you for what you came into. I'm sure there were a lot of teammates that didn't survive the John Brady wrath. I imagine you also played counselor to a lot of teammates.
Yeah, to a degree. I think we had one Christmas where 5 guys transferred.
At Christmas time.
At Christmas, And the good thing about it was that when that happened, we never made excuses. Like it was, okay, next guy up, let's go. And we figured out, and the thing I'm most proud of in my time at Samford, and I had a good career individually, but is the fact that I was the first guy to play on 4 consecutive winning teams. And because I had the medical redshirt my sophomore year, which would have been our best team for sure, and we ended up being decimated by injuries. And but I was the first guy to do that, and Coach Brady was the first coach ever to do that. And so, granted, we didn't go compete for national championships and things like that, but I think he got the very most out of the group that he had with us.
When you were playing for Coach Brady, he was able to live up to his promise. He was able to schedule LSU thanks to his relationship with Dale Brown and Joe Dean, and he got you guys, scheduled to play in the PMAC. Take me back to that time when you finally realized, hey, we're actually playing LSU, and what that meant to you. And before we get to the actual game, all the lead up to that game, what was that like for you, a kid from Baton Rouge?
Well, it was really cool. As the years went by, I started to wonder, are we going to do this or not? And little did I know he had been planning it the entire time. So when I medical redshirted, We were actually going to do it 2 years later, but then he bumped it back because he wanted it to be my senior year. And so, yeah, I mean, it was there's no hoopla going on around Baton Rouge because it's just Samford coming into play, right? It's an easy win. But for us, it was a big deal. For me, it was a big deal, obviously. We also had a couple other Louisiana guys on the team that year. And so it was just a lot of fun. And I remember Dan Bournet introducing us in the starting lineups, and I went to school with his son and had known Mr. Bournet for a long time. And when he announced my name, I remember as I'm listening to it, he's almost announcing it like I'm playing for LSU.
Right, with a little extra juice.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then we probably had as many fans there as LSU did that day because I think it was, in December. And,
mid-December game.
And it was us, right? They weren't playing an SEC game, so cool deal.
For a kid who was a basketball junkie growing up in Baton Rouge, I'm sure you were an LSU fan. I'm sure you were a Dale Brown fan. And so you had a chance to face the legend and what ended up being his final season at LSU. I'm sure a lot of that went through your mind watching Shaquille O'Neal and Chris Jackson and all these greats play, and there you are just a couple years later playing on the same floor.
It was amazing because we had seats whenever I was a kid. I had seats right behind one of the baskets, and to see all the guys that I grew up watching, all the way back from Ethan Martin, Howard Carter, Jordy Holberg, who I still have a relationship with today, then up through Ricky and Don Redden, rest his soul, and then Derek Taylor. And I mean, my favorite all-time player that I ever watched at LSU was Jerry Reynolds.
Oh, Iceman,
the
Iceman. Oh, he was so smooth.
And probably my second favorite player was John Williams.
Yeah.
When he came through. Now, Chris
you liked
Jackson
the forwards, didn't you?
Oh, I love, even though I wasn't one. But Chris, I just like big guys who could handle the ball.
Right.
And Chris Jackson coming in, certainly the most exciting college guard I've ever seen. Not at LSU, just period. And then watching Shaq, and then get to be on that floor, especially after having lost the last game that I get to play on that floor. It was definitely satisfying.
So you end up have a magical night. Samford shocks the world, beats LSU in a low-scoring affair. You end up with 6 threes in the game. I mean, I'm sure that's not something you did every night either. What was that like at the end? You play well, you win the game. I mean, that what was it like coming off the court, the locker room, that feeling, and it had to be a thrill for your family.
A lot of fun. Just able to do something that I didn't know if I was ever going to get the chance to do. Of course, when I watched LSU play, I thought about playing for them as I was growing up, and then when realizing that I probably wasn't that level coming out of high school. Of course, I thought I was, but then you realize you're not. But it was just good to know that by the time I graduated, I had reached that level. I was able to play at that level, and so from a personal standpoint as well as a team standpoint, it was a big deal for us to come into my hometown and get a win.
Were you and John Brady able to have a moment or a conversation or anything right after the game about beating LSU, and what was that like?
Well, we just had a hug because we knew, for him being from Louisiana, and then for me as well, that it was just something that we both wanted desperately. And lo and behold, he gets the job the next year and has a great career.
Did you know, being a kid, I'll call you a kid, I mean, senior, being a senior and a young man, did you know and did the team know that, hey, that win probably meant John Brady ain't going to be here next year, that he was probably going to get a bigger job? Did you know that at the time? Not saying the LSU job, but did you have a feeling he was on to bigger and better things?
I think when you're a player, you get so caught up in the season, you don't really think about that stuff, and it wasn't really talked about. And so, but I will say this: that whenever we found out that he did get the job, nobody was surprised, and it made perfect sense for sure. So, we were happy for him, and obviously he took advantage of the situation for sure.
We'll take a break, and when we come back on Sports Shorts presented by LaBerge Casino, we'll continue our conversation with Jonathan Pixley about what was next. Okay, the big moment happens, and John Brady, of course, ends up at LSU, and then Jonathan ends up kind of moving on towards his coaching career. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more, and then later on in the show, we'll get to that magical season that Dunham just had, where they won their second state championship in the last few years, and what was unfortunately one of the most bizarre state championships you'll ever see, and many of them were like that, played without fans. We'll talk about that. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue right after this.
Sports fans, you don't want to miss the biggest celebration of the summer. It's the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame Induction Weekend in Natchitoches, June 25th through 27th. The 2020 Hall of Fame class features legendary sports figures Nick Saban, Phil Robertson, and many more. Log on to lasportshall.com for more ticket information. If you're an avid sports fan, then you need to check out the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, located in historic downtown Natchitoches, next to the Chateau St. Denis Hotel and the Natchitoches Convention Center. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame is where the rich history of Louisiana sports is told through the pictures, artifacts, and by the legends themselves in video archives. Come to the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and Northwest Louisiana History Museum and visit a world-renowned architectural marvel. For more information and to purchase tickets to the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame events, visit lasportshall.com/purchase. Sports fans, you don't want to miss the biggest celebration of the summer. It's the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame Induction Weekend in Natchitoches, June 25th through 27th. The 2020 Hall of Fame class features legendary sports figures Nick Saban, Phil Robertson, and many more. Log on to lasportshall.com for more ticket information.
Can't get enough sports shorts? Tune into Sports Shorts TV on Cox HD Channel 1013 Mondays at 8, Tuesdays at 9, and ETEL Channel 4. That's 52 weeks a year to get educated on sports by the best. Joel Davis and Ronnie Rance.
Welcome back, everyone. Sports Shorts presented by LeBear's Casino, now open 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. 18 Steak, one of the best restaurants in the city, is open. The Bon Temps Buffet, go on by, check them out. Hotel's open, the pool, you name it, and they'd love to see you. And a lot of fans, a lot of friends have been kind of going by there and enjoying a little night out. They're doing the social distancing on the casino floor, so you don't have to worry about all of that. LeBear's Casino, tell them you heard it right here on Sports Shorts. Joining me right now is the head basketball coach for the last 20 seasons over at Dunham School here in Baton Rouge. They just won the Division III state championship just a few months ago. It's not that long ago on the calendar, but it seems like forever ago with all the COVID and everything. That's the world has been upside down ever since the middle of March, and you guys won the state championship right before that. And it was so strange because you play the semifinal game against Randy Livingston, one of the great basketball players ever to come in high school, maybe the greatest high school basketball player in the history of Louisiana. I remember him being on the cover of Sports Illustrated in high school at Newman, and he was going to be the next superstar, and unfortunately blew out his knee a couple times in college. But so Randy now goes back to his alma mater, the head coach at Newman in New Orleans. You play him in the semifinal in front of a giant crowd. Because of select and non-select and the split thing, which we'll talk about if we get time a little bit later on, you're going to host the state championship, which is not common and probably had never been done before.
Right.
So the little gym at Dunham, which can fit how many? 1,000 right at the max, is going to be completely full with people outside. And then all of a sudden it goes from 1,000 to 0.
Right.
How did the kids handle that? And I'm sure the beginning of before the game is weird, but once the ball's thrown up, how different was it playing in front of 0 instead of 1,000?
So it actually went in another stage. So it went from, we probably were going to have 1,500 there, right? To then they were going to let basically parents in.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot that.
And
before
then,
it went to 0.
And then it went to nobody except for completely necessary staff. So we're warming up, and that's where you first notice how strange it is.
Right.
And I give the talk to the guys prior to the game in the film room, and then we come out, and you're like, okay, this is really strange. And then when the ball goes up and the first basket goes in, because if I remember correctly, I think we scored in our first possession, and you only hear our bench cheering, that's when I turned to my coaches. I was like, are we really doing this right now?
Right. This is for a state championship, and there's nobody cheering.
Yeah, it's crazy. And things that I could yell during the course of a game that may not come across any way to an official.
Right.
Now it's exacerbated because I'm the only voice yelling
Right.
at that point. So
Right.
you just had to, I guess, tailor some things.
Dial
to the
it down a
situation.
little bit. Yeah. From a player's standpoint, how did they handle it? And again, I just suspect, because we've all done AAU and
Sure.
we've done summer league and things like that, where it's high level basketball with very little crowd, if any. And so I think back to that, like it's a, hey, gym floor in Orlando or something, and there's 10 people in the stands and you're playing basketball. But at some point, once you start going, it's basketball, and you're competing just as hard whether there's 1,500 people in the stands or zero.
Well, the good thing for us was we had beaten them fairly handily at home just, several weeks earlier. And then we play them in a district tournament game.
And it's Episcopal we're talking about.
Episcopal,
Dunham's playing
yeah.
Episcopal in
Yeah.
the finals.
So we play them in a district tournament game. Don't play well. They play well. They're ready to beat us. First time they've beaten us in several years. And so they beat us in a close game when we played them at Port Allen. So we had that still in our mind, which was a good thing. So we approached the game the right way.
Right.
And we're up, I think it was 13, 14, something like that at halftime. And I walk into the locker room, and you can just see it on our guys' faces, like, okay, we got it. It's done.
Right.
And I didn't feel like their mindset, I felt like it changed a little bit. And then when they came out, after, I told them, I said, here's the deal. They're not going anywhere. They're playing for the same thing you're playing for. Oh, by the way, they've beaten you, right? Mm-hmm. And sure enough, you could just feel it. It's just kind of possession by possession. There was a lot of momentum change. And you got to give their kids and Coach Chris Beckman amazing credit, because they never went away and had a shot at the buzzer to actually win the game, and
Right.
it just didn't go in.
I want to, as best you can, explain the last couple seconds of the game, because it was a crazy couple seconds. You guys are tied at, I think 47 apiece. You go down, you hit the go-ahead bucket to go up 2 with what, a second or couple seconds left?
We actually got fouled and then made one of 2 free throws to go up 1.
To go up 1.
Yeah.
Where did the technical thing come in? Explain what happened. I'm talking about
You're talking about 3 years ago.
Oh, was that 3 years ago? Okay. Oh,
So
yeah. Okay.
Different story.
Same scenario, same close
Which is crazy. We're playing Episcopal
state championship, right?
in Lake Charles,
Yeah.
right in the arena. We are Jordan Wright, who currently is at Vanderbilt playing, hits a basket to put us up 2 with point whatever.
Yeah, I think it was 0.5 seconds left. So
Something
there's no chance for anything to happen.
I hear a horn go off. Okay, so we think it's over. Well, we have a couple guys actually
Celebrating.
more than a couple, run out on the floor. Okay, which they shouldn't have done, and they run out on the floor, and Episcopal had called timeout, and so we get hit with a technical foul for running out on the floor. They go to the free throw line, split 1 of 2, puts them down 1. They have the ball on the sideline, and we force them into a shot that is just an
Right.
impossible shot, and we win the game. But that did happen. So
So why is it that because I mean, look, we watch TV all the time. Coach walks halfway out onto the court, calls timeout. Everybody's walking on the court. They put chairs out. I mean, by the time the official gives timeout, half the team's out there with chairs, and so why is this different?
I did have
A horn, which you thought ended the game, versus a timeout call and a horn. What's one different than the other?
Well, I think, first of all, that I don't think, and I don't know what other coaches feel like, but I don't think that, like, when you go to the Final Four, they always send you, in a semifinal game, they send you a crew from a specific association.
Right.
So same guys, right? But when you go to the state finals, they send you 3 different guys from 3 different
That have never
associations.
worked together.
So that's never made sense to me. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I just know that our kids shouldn't have run on the floor. And
Boy, that was that.
I mean,
to be just unbelievable.
to lose like that,
Right, we
or
could've-
to even go to overtime
Right,
like that.
you could have possibly lost on a crazy call with a half a second left on guys thinking it was the whistle to end the game versus the timeout.
Right.
But fortunately, you didn't. And crazily, you got Episcopal, who in both of them,
Yeah.
your bitter rival in the same district,
and win by
whatnot.
1. And the second time, they have the shot at the buzzer.
Right.
It just doesn't go in. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
When you got done playing for John Brady at Sanford, you get the big win against LSU. The world turns. John Brady ends up the basketball coach at LSU. Your career is over with. you're looking at what's next. How did we end up at Dunham? What was your road?
So I wanted to go play professionally, as most guys do,
Sure.
right? So and I would have had the ability to do so. I'd actually worked out with San Antonio, and Coach Popovich had just come down out of the front office, and then I had worked out out in Atlanta as well. But I went to my agent had a conversation with Jerry West and Mitch Kupchak. There was even talk that I might get drafted with one of their second round draft picks. They had a couple. I knew it was a long shot. I knew me playing in the NBA was a long shot, but I felt like I could have at least played overseas. So I go to LA back when they used to have the summer league at Long Beach.
Right.
And in the third or fourth game out there, I ripped my knee to shreds again. And when I come home and have it done again, Dr. Griffith, who did my first surgery, he basically tells me, look, it's done. It's over.
Right.
I think maybe today, if it happens, I probably would be able to continue playing.
Right. 20-something years ago, maybe there's some new stuff that they could have done.
Never know, right? But nonetheless, my career was over at that point, and I kind of bounce around, and I get a job here, and then I go to private business here, and I end up getting a phone call from J.P. Piper, who ended up being the head coach at Nicholls State for several years. He was the principal at Dunham, and he says, look, I want to coach for one more year. I hear you're back in town. Would you come be my assistant, and then you can have it after that? And that day, before that phone call happens, my wife had said, look, you really need to get back into coaching. So it really
It all fell
kind of
together.
crazy, and so that's how I ended up.
So you're over there at Dunham. Your wife's over there at Dunham, does a great job as the volleyball coach and athletic director?
She was the
Or
athletic
she
director.
was
She's
for a
just
while.
a volleyball
Okay.
coach now. Yeah.
And over the years, you've kind of had a reputation being a guy, private instruction and working with players and obviously you still do that. You still work with NBA players and guys that are trying to get into the league and get them trained up and coached up. But who are some guys that you've worked with in the past that, household names and some big players that have kind of fell under your tutelage?
Well, in the past, I mean, when Garrett Temple was he was already in the league, but he was kind of bouncing back and forth between what was the D League back then and the league. I worked with him a fair amount. Prior to Langston Galloway's rookie season, I worked with him, getting him,
Another Baton Rouge guy, Christian Life.
ready for the draft. Yeah, I have worked with a handful of LSU guys, Darnell Lazar, Ronald Dupree, guys like that, and now I'm focusing a lot of attention right now on Skylar Mays because he's getting ready in this crazy situation. We don't even know if there's going to be a combine
Right.
or how it's going to be, but been working with
a
him for
guy
years.
like Skylar Mays, who was such a good player at LSU, such a good teammate. Everybody knows what a great student and person he is. I truly believe, and not knowing near as much as you, that he would have totally benefited from in-house visits, going and meeting with teams, getting them to know him one-on-one, working them out, going to these camps, letting them show up against the best players, and seeing how he plays, and also a leadership. His leadership skills. I think his stock would have risen tremendously had he been able to go through the process in a normal year. But it's not going to be a normal year, and it's not a normal year. That said, how has he been able to kind of raise his stock with a sort of a hands-off approach?
Well, anytime you're face-to-face with that young man, it's an impressive situation. So the Zoom meetings that he's done, all the interviews he's done with teams, are
you in on those?
I'm not. I'm not in on those,
Okay.
no. I'm in on conversations with his agents, but I don't have anything to do with any of the teams. I know that those have gone well, and they're always going to go well because, he is who he is. And if you know Skylar, then not only is he an extremely intelligent individual, graduated magna cum laude, but he is a very personable young guy too. The most impressive thing to me for him is, without being in workouts in front of teams, without having the combine, he has worked for the past 7-8 weeks like he's in front of somebody. And so that's why I know he's going to have a very long NBA career. I really believe that.
You believe in Skylar Mays. You believe he can do multiple things. His game allows him to, handle the ball, shoot, defend, and of course we all know what type of teammate he is and leader. Will that translate into being drafted, or will you think he'll be a free agent?
I think he's going to get drafted. I believe there's too many teams, especially with the lack of a combine, which there may be one, but they're talking now apparently that it may be a virtual deal with just more interviews. and lack of ability to work these guys out. I think a lot of teams, especially the teams that are kind of already established at the end of the first round and maybe mid-second round on, will want a guy that when you watch film, you know he's ready to
battle
produce.
tested. Yeah.
You know, he's ready to produce right now. The best part about him is if you ever saw him play in high school, he was a pure point guard. Best court vision, and that includes Randy, who I think is the best high school player that's ever played in Louisiana. He has the best court vision of any high school player I've ever seen, Skylar, that is. And for him to transition to where he was able to play off the ball, it's only helped his game. So now he can play both guard spots and become kind of a jack of all trades at the next level, I think.
He played for Will Wade, and of course LSU basketball over the last 3 years has just gotten better and better and better. From an outsider's perspective, from a guy who obviously knows the game and knows the inner workings of college, the college game, what are you seeing from afar that has LSU on the right footing, you know, for their program moving forward? What are Will Wade's positive attributes that are helping, you know, that he's brought to the table that's been such a change from the two previous kind of administrations?
I think he's getting NBA players. I mean, that's one.
At the end of the day,
right?
Talent's number one, right?
You got to have it, and then there's got to be a certain level of discipline. I know he probably wasn't overly excited with how they defended this past year, and I'm quite certain that they'll be better at that this coming year. But to have NBA players, I mean, with a shot clock, you have to have guys who can go get their own basket at the end of a shot clock, especially against teams later in the season. He's had those, and I feel like guys are developing, you know, while they're there. So, you know, I feel like Skylar speaks highly of him. I have had a few conversations with him. He's always invited me out to practice. He's very generous in that regard. I just think that as long as he continues to get good players, and he has a purpose and a plan, which I do believe that he has, they're going to be successful.
Do you buy into, you know, the perspective that if you get too good of players, if you get too many guys that have the one and done vision, you know, sometimes it doesn't work out. You have guys like maybe a Smart even, who probably thought he would play 1 year at LSU and go pro from Scotlandville. He ends up staying 2 years. If you have too many guys that are kind of disappointed to be back for a second or maybe even third year, can you get those guys to buy into playing defense? I mean, and that's kind of my biggest thing. When you got a bunch of guys that are 4 or 5 year players and understand that, hey, I got to play defense in order to get on the floor, or I got to play defense in order for us to be successful, and really don't have – I mean, Ricky Blanton once told me when he was the coach at Nichols, he said, Ronnie, everybody in college basketball, no matter what level, Southland Conference, SEC, doesn't matter, thinks they're going to play in the NBA. He said they all think – now, of course they're not, right, but they all have that dream, that vision. They really think, if I just get my minutes, I can play in the NBA.
That's right.
And so I get what I'm saying. I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth when I say that, because you got some guys that are one-and-done guys, and they believe I'm going to be a one-and-done guy, and you got others that realize I'm going to play 4 years. They both feel like they're going to get to the NBA, but the one-and-done guy really has a realistic chance. My point is, how do you get that player that believes he's going to be on campus 8 months to play defense versus guys that are, you know, 4 year guys like a Skylar Mays?
I think you have to have those 3 and 4 year guys around for those 1 year guys, right?
It's a mix.
It has to be, because and then those 3 and 4 year guys have to be productive enough players to earn the respect of the guys who are going to be one and done.
Sure.
And then to me, you know, if you realize or prove that you're not going to be a one and done guy, then to me as a coach, it's much easier for me to get you to play defense moving forward, because you realize, oh, I'm not good enough. I better do all of this right now. But, you know, there's very few guys. I mean, Calipari pulls it off, right? Krzyzewski's done it a few times. But to get a collective group of guys who are going to be just one and done, to win at the highest level and to compete at the highest level, it's really, really difficult, because you're dealing with 18, 19-year-old kids. It's tough.
Yeah. As you're going through this process with Skylar Mays, kind of working him out, getting ready for the NBA draft, can you give us any hints behind the scenes? Are there any particular teams that are more interested in him than others?
No. I mean, we don't really – I don't discuss that with him. I just talk about, you know, what his agents are telling him. My whole focus for him is we got to make him a better basketball player, and we got to make him feel more comfortable in the skills that he's already good at, and certainly the ones that he's not good at. And you know, he is today, even though he hasn't been able to play pickup and do those things, from a drill standpoint, he is much lighter on his feet. He shoots the ball with much greater range. His footwork has improved immensely. And he is willing to put in the time and the hours and do it. And the best part about him is if we get to the end of a drill and he's not comfortable with it, coach, let's run it again. Let's do it again until I get it right. So, I mean, it's a joy to work with him.
A lot of those same attributes can be said about Garrett Temple, a guy you worked with. And what's interesting is you go back to LSU's third Final Four team in its history, 2006, when John Brady led LSU to the Final Four, and you think of all the great players that they had. Garrett Temple was the guy in the starting lineup you never would have thought would have had the longest NBA career.
That's right.
And here he is with really no end in sight for his career. What did he do, to get to the point of where he's at, and why has he been able to be so successful to be able to play in the NBA for this long?
Real simple. He took what he was already good at, which was he was a phenomenal defender and much more athletic than people realized. Mm-hmm. And he immediately brought that to any NBA team so if he's not a starter, you bring him in for 10, 12, 15 minutes, you can put him on the best perimeter on the other team, 1, 2, or 3, and he can make that person's life miserable for a while. Once he got a little further into the league and really worked, and I mean, as you know, you go from high school to college, it's more of a job. And then when you go from college to the NBA, it is a job. Mm-hmm. And so all you're doing is basketball. He completely sold out to becoming a good jump shooter and a good open three-point shooter. And so now he's a guy that if you leave him open, it's going in. So he's a great, what everybody calls a 3-and-D guy. I think that's what he is. The best part about him, though, and why teams will continue to sign him and why he'll have a great career after he's done playing, either in front office or media, is he's an unbelievable team guy. He's a great locker room guy, which is one of the main reasons that team that he was on at LSU went as far as it did.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned when Garrett Temple's playing days are over, the next transition, whether it's in the front office or broadcasting or media. You didn't mention coaching. Is he giving you any insight, or have you heard?
I don't know.
What may be next, because obviously all the Temples are successful and they're all a smart, hard-working family. He would be successful doing anything in Baton Rouge. May have bigger aspirations outside of the state. Where do you project him or think he could be?
I mean, I've never talked to him about coaching. I could see him very easily in a front office position, or even in a front office position with the league itself.
Right.
Just because he's that kind of guy. So, but if he wanted to get into coaching, he'd be good at that too. There's no question about it.
Your 20th season was successful, or over 20 seasons over at Dunham, 2 state championships in the last few years. Players to watch, as you got any guys in the pipeline that are big-time prospects in the next couple of years, maybe guys that will wait or others will be calling on?
Well, Carlos Stewart is a guard that we have who will be a senior. I argue, without question, he's the best player in the state coming back this year.
Really?
Any classification, I don't care who it is, I think he's the best player in the state. He's super explosive. He's the best shooter in the state, hands down, and that's not arguable.
Height for him?
Well, he was about 6 feet tall this year, but crazy enough, over the pandemic time, he's grown about 1.5 inches.
Wow.
Which is shocking at this age, right? So he's almost 6'2" with shoes on now. Got a 6'7", 6'8" wingspan.
Wow.
So super long, plays really hard. And I think, without question, I believe he's a high major. Now, he is already committed to Santa Clara University.
The Gauchos, huh?
Yeah. And he's
was that Steve Nash?
I was Steve Nash, absolutely. Herb Sendek, who was the coach at NC State, is now the coach at Santa Clara. But I think Carlos is a big time player. And then the rest of my guys, in all reality, are a bunch of role players who are really good high school players who the stuff that we have been able to do over the month of June, no contact, anything like that, we were able to do drill work. They made a big jump in the 90-day span, which is kind of crazy. We're trying to figure out, they just look different physically. So I know they've been working on their own as well.
You mentioned your young man headed to Santa Clara, at least committed right now. Normally he'd be playing AAU like crazy this summer. He'd be showing off. All the bigger colleges would have a chance to see him and maybe even have other offers by now. That's not happening. What are you able to do to help him get looks, or what is he able to do during this pandemic time where there's really no contact?
Nothing right now. All he can do is have Zoom meetings with coaches. I am confident, though, that by the time we come back to school, something will be in place for coaches to be able to get out and come see you. I mean, worst case scenario, we've got to have situations where maybe you can do a Zoom video workout. Right.
Well, I did talk to Nolan Kane, LSU baseball assistant coach, and he's a recruiting coordinator, and this was maybe a month ago, and he told me that that's what they were doing. Like, these big organizations say, the Louisiana Knights, for example, is a baseball organization here in the state, or the Orlando Baseball Club. These organizations that have all these high-level players playing on their travel ball teams, they'll actually simulate workouts. They'll have indoor cages with cameras and stuff, and take a really good pitcher throwing against a really good hitter, and they'll go at it, and they got the velocity right there on the screen and all the data on the on what the ball's doing and bat speed, and you name it. And so you're literally sitting at home watching prospects work out, and you're able to see on the screen the data. It's incredible. Not that I hate recruiting that way, and I hate making decisions on whether a guy can play or not based on what a radar score says in a cage in Orlando. But at the same time, it's better than nothing, right? It gives you an idea. And so I imagine, basketball is going to be very similar. You're going to see guys working out, running, jumping, and doing things for the next few months from afar. We'll take a time out. We're visiting with Jonathan Pixley, the head basketball coach over at Dunham High School. I want to get your thoughts on if you think there will be fans in the stands this year for high school basketball, and what the LHSAA and other states are mulling over the options, maybe moving seasons up and back. We'll talk about that and more. Don't go anywhere. Sports Shorts presented by LeBear's Casino. We'll be back right after this.
Do you have
Sports fans, you don't want to miss the biggest celebration of the summer. It's the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame induction weekend in Natchitoches, June 25th through 27th. The 2020 Hall of Fame class features legendary sports figures Nick Saban, Phil Robertson, and many more. Log on to lasportshall.com for more ticket information. If you're an avid sports fan, then you need to check out the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, located in historic downtown Natchitoches, next to the Chateau Saint Denis Hotel and the Natchitoches Convention Center. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame is where the rich history of Louisiana sports is told through the pictures, artifacts, and by the legends themselves in video archives. Come to the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and Northwest Louisiana History Museum and visit a world-renowned architectural marvel. For more information and to purchase tickets to the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame events, visit lasportshall.com/purchase. Sports fans, you don't want to miss the biggest celebration of the summer. It's the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame induction weekend in Natchitoches, June 25th through 27th. The 2020 Hall of Fame class features legendary sports figures Nick Saban, Phil Robertson, and many more. Log on to lasportshall.com for more ticket information.
Can't get enough Sports Shorts? Tune into Sports Shorts TV on Cox HD Channel 1013 Mondays at 8, Tuesdays at 9, and ETEL Channel 4. That's 52 weeks a year to get educated on sports by the best. Joel Davis and Ronnie Rance.
Welcome back, everyone. Ronnie Rance here with you for LeBear's Casino. Represent LeBear's Casino as a title sponsor of Sports Shorts. Also, we had a little commercial right there. I wanted to tell you the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame induction weekend, which is normally the last weekend in June every single year. That's now been pushed back to December 15th through 17th. So all 8 of the events will take place in Natchitoches during the Christmas lights. For the first time ever, Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame will be in Natchitoches and Alexandria December 15th through 17th. Go to lasportshall.com to get more information, to be a part of all the events that we have going on. Nick Saban, Phil Robertson, many others. Kerry Kittles getting inducted into Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame this year, a former St. Aug great from New Orleans. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And for those golfers out there, our Hall of Fame golf tournament was now October 4th and 5th at the Golden Nugget in Lake Charles. Fantastic event there, 2-day event last year. It's now been pushed back to October 4th and 5th. We'll have plenty more information for you moving forward, but go to lasportshall.com to be a part of it. We're visiting with Jonathan Pixley, the state championship coach in Division III at Dunham this past year. A fantastic win over Episcopal in the finals that no one saw other than the folks that watched on the closed circuit TV. Talked to a mutual friend of ours, Henry Hayes, whose son's on the team, and he said it was the weirdest thing. The parents were over at a house, all gathered around the computer, watching on a closed circuit TV. I mean, I can't even imagine, being my daughter's 20 years old, went to St. Joseph's, played volleyball in high school, and I couldn't imagine watching her in the state championship on a video screen, knowing I'm right down the street, from the school, but not able to go in the gym. I mean, but he said it was the most bizarre thing, but to see all these parents hovered around a TV trying to figure it out.
Before I answer that, you mentioned Kerry Kittles.
Yeah.
He won the state championship.
Oh, he was the guy. Your year. Okay,
Yeah.
So 92.
That year.
Aug wins the
We were
title.
looking forward to playing
You
them.
would have played Kerry Kittles in the finals
we
had you
were
gotten
dying
there.
to. Yeah. Anyhow, so
Yeah.
we had students outside the gym as well that day. Okay, so
you could hear them cheering for buckets outside the gym?
Well, I couldn't hear them because
Right.
they had to be a certain distance from
Right.
the gym. But they had it streaming on a TV that was set up outside the gym, and we had a lot of fun with it because you could hear them banging on the door after the final horn had gone off
Right.
and everything. But weird is not even
Yeah.
the word to
Yeah.
describe it. It just is surreal, I guess. And I'm gonna go ahead and say it. The craziest part about it, I think, is at the end of the game. So we're shaking hands with the Episcopal, right?
Right.
And there's nobody in the gym because there's not supposed to be any contact with anybody, right? But we got players hugging each other,
Yeah,
coaches
dogpiling.
hugging
Yeah.
each other. We're hugging Episcopal's players and
Right.
coaches and everything, and
And then as soon as you walk out of the gym, you're hugging your fans and the parents and the kids. Yeah.
it was different for sure.
I remember seeing the video of Scotlandville. They won their state championship in their classification, same kind of way in their gym with no fans, and watching them dogpile, on the court with nobody there. It was just wild. And even the guys that were able to play on the public school side over in Lake Charles, same scenario, giant arena, nobody in it.
I was trying to talk Chris into playing, Beckman, the head coach of the Episcopal, into playing on Thursday because I didn't think if we got to Friday, I didn't think we were going to play.
Right.
Because they were shutting down all the conference tournaments. And they had just come off a really difficult game traveling to Lafayette.
You wanted the
Christian,
extra day.
Yeah. Made sense. But
it almost made a lot of sense
Yeah.
for him.
Sure did.
Talking with Jonathan Pixley, your wife and you are kind of the power couple in Baton Rouge over at Dunham. She's been over there just longer than you?
Well, actually, one less year than me.
One less year.
She was at St. Michael's before that.
Yeah, over volleyball at Dunham, which of course has a great program. You're doing basketball, but both of you are kind of known for the facility that you guys own and run. The Breck facility, the Sportsplex off of got Kenilworth and Perkins
Yeah.
right there by the Velodrome. Everybody knows where it is. And I was surprising to find out it's only been open 6 years. It seems like it's been longer. I've spent a lot of days and nights and watching volleyball when my daughter played there. But talk about how you guys got into that. And I know that's a fantastic facility in Baton Rouge that a lot of parents out there, whether it's basketball, volleyball, summer camps, you name it, have spent a lot of time in that Sportsplex right there off Perkins and Kenilworth.
Well, it's pretty simple. I was doing a ton of private lessons and group lessons, and Dunham was generous enough to allow me to use their facility for years. And my wife did the same thing, and I had Red Storm basketball that grew up there as well. She had Red Storm volleyball, which is still continued to this day. Red Storm basketball has recently been kind of restarted by Chase Stanley, who is kind of our day-to-day guy over at Sportsplex, does a phenomenal job. But we knew a guy named Jim Bernhardt who I coached his son at Dunham and did private lessons with him. And he came to me one day and said, what's your goal with this? And told him, we'd like our own facility and so that we can help more people. And basically with his help and knowledge and his everything that he had
His connections
with him,
and
right?
everything, yeah.
Breck and him came together, and the money came together, and next thing you know, we got a big multi-court facility, because originally the plans that me and my wife had drawn up were a single court, metal building, right? And he came to me with different plans, so to speak.
Right.
Now we have Team Sportsplex, which, we, with the pandemic, obviously for weeks we're unable to do anything, but now with phase 2, we're able to do trainings only, right? No contact. But we have opened back up, and we have to have a certain number of kids in the facility at once and all that. But we're able to do that, and we are more than blessed and more than fortunate to be able to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic facility for those in Baton Rouge, and of course, I can attest. My daughter spent a couple of years in the Red Storm volleyball program. They do a great job, and it's kind of nice also to not have to bounce around from gym to gym, and you know where you're going to be each time and all that. And they do a fantastic job over there, and of course, Red Storm basketball too. What are the ages of the Red Storm basketball?
So Red Storm basketball is just middle school. Back whenever I was the director of it,
Yeah,
we
you had
ran it all the
the
way up
different-
through.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now that we're high school and seasons and all that are on the horizon, we're now about a month and a half away from when school's supposed to start back. At this point, we're all playing Nostradamus and just trying to, guess the future and predict the future. But what are you hearing, seeing? What do you feel like high school basketball and athletics in general are going to look like this year?
I have no idea.
That's the honest answer.
Right. I mean, I'd like to think we were going to play, at least even if with no fans in the stands. I would hope the worst case scenario is we're able to play with parents of players in the stands. I would hope that that's the worst case scenario. I know that the LHSAA, Mr. Bonine, had discussed possibly flipping football and baseball seasons. He is now committed to not doing that. So I'm not really sure what that's going to look like. But I think that the winter sports and the spring sports are going to have a lot better chance to go on because the fall sports are going to be the guinea pigs, right? I think volleyball should be okay because it's technically a non-contact sport. Football is going to be the interesting one to see what happens.
We'll actually have Eddie Bonine on the show in a few weeks. He's out of town on vacation and whatnot till after the 12th of July, but we'll have him on towards the end of the month and try to hear from him what's coming up. State of Texas, you mentioned that he's already come out and said that no, he's not going to flip the seasons. I know the state of Texas is actually very much considering playing football in the spring or the winter and playing baseball and things like that in the summer. From a basketball standpoint, I don't know that it matters, and I guess if whether it's summer, spring, but it makes sense for basketball if you're going to have a sport that comes back sooner than later, basketball, because of the numbers, right?
I would say that.
And you could play without fans easily. We've already proved that in a state championship game.
Unfortunately, yeah. I think you could do it as long as, again, right, contact has to be allowed. Yeah. But I think, like, for example, if you were to flip, you have to flip football, baseball, right, because so many kids play both of those sports, right? Volleyball is really difficult to flip because if you flipped it to the spring, you're interfering with club volleyball. And you'd have kids, I'm telling you, you would have kids who
that
would say,
no, we're going to play club because it's bigger, more games,
more
travel,
exposure,
all
right.
that. Yeah.
Basketball, you'd run into the issue if it were pushed later. I don't think, I'm with you. I think if anything, it would be pushed earlier.
Right.
But yeah, I think you could pull it off because of the numbers if you had to push it earlier. And plus the fact that you got a lot of high school teams that do stuff over the summer with their teams. So if you had to come back and play it in the fall, you could. I just think that we're probably more than likely going to play.
Is there a scenario where we will see, in your opinion, high school athletics being played while kids are doing online teaching? Is that hey, I'm not going to have everybody come to campus. Not going to have everybody in campus. You're going to be at home. You're going to do it online. But if you play sports, yes, you can come on campus and play sports.
I do. I see that potentially happening. In fact, I was talking to Jordan Wright, who's a former player of mine, who's with Vanderbilt right now, who he already said Vanderbilt has said that they're going to go to school until Thanksgiving, and then they're not coming back on campus.
Which LSU's already said that.
Which they just said that as well. So I think the interesting thing is, like, what's the motivation behind that? Is it football? for students to be on campus for football.
Right.
Is it an economic decision? Who knows what it is? But basically what they're saying is you're not going to have students on campus for basketball or anything moving forward after
Well,
that.
I can tell you as a parent of someone who's at LSU, just finished her sophomore year, my daughter did, and is in a sorority and who made a deposit to live on campus in the sorority house. It's an economic
Yeah, it has to
decision
be, yeah.
to have
Let's call it
those
what it is.
because I've already tried to get our money back and the answer was no.
call it what it is.
Take a hike because I was like, hey, you can't now. The big start of school has been pushed back. The end of school has been moved up. It's like, why are we moving you out and doing
Why
all
even
this
have it?
expense?
Right.
And it's like, no, they want the money. And the bottom line is, you put students on there. They got to eat. They've got to live.
Yep.
You got to charge them for parking. You know, it's a revenue maker. So they can make more money by having the students on campus and keep other people employed and whatnot as well. Is there a scenario where, I mean, in college, we know football is king.
Mm-hmm.
We know that if football season doesn't happen and there is no football revenue, no TV money from football and whatnot, then it is going to affect college
Everything.
athletics disastrously across the board. You're going to see teams shut down, schools shut down, athletically. What about high school? Where does high school football fall in that equation? Can high school sports move on, survive a year without football?
They can survive it, but the issue is, like with football, you already hit on a lot of the main points, but what it does to the community, right?
Right.
So to me, Friday night high school football helps, maybe smaller restaurants because people are going to get food immediately before the game or immediately after the game. So all of the businesses around those high schools, I think, are affected too if there's no high school football. The other thing that high school football does, as you well know, is it generates a spirit for athletics to start the season, to start the year off. And so I wonder how that's affected moving forward. Or maybe, if you've got a good basketball program or a good volleyball program or a good baseball program, whatever, maybe people just start looking forward to that more. But I think you can survive a year without it, but it's going to be tough.
Only got a couple minutes left in the show, and I just want to change the subject just for a second. Big basketball fan. Right down the road is the New Orleans Pelicans.
Sure.
And the schedule just came out. Eight games left to go. Kind of an easier schedule. Some other folks in the league aren't
Perfect.
real happy about
Perfect.
that. But let's face it, the league wants to get Zion in
No
the
doubt.
playoffs the best they can.
No doubt.
Do you think it happens? Do you think they make that playoff play-in game, which is basically the ninth spot?
I got to see what the guys look like physically first before I can make that call. They're going to have a chance, though, with their schedule, for sure. And I'm hearing that Zion, we're not going to recognize him
Yeah, it
when he
looks
comes back.
different.
So
Yeah.
if that's the case, then, yeah, there's a chance because he's special.
In about 30 seconds, what's your take on Zion as far as what he will be to basketball over the next 10, 15 years?
I think he's potentially transcendent. People try to have comps for him. There's no comp for him. He handles the ball better than Charles Barkley did. He jumps better than LeBron does. He's going to shoot it better as he gets better, as he gets more skilled and more, I guess, has more experience. But the best thing about him is I think the kid's super competitive. So I think he looks different, but he's that guy who could take the league to a next level. So when LeBron leaves, I think we're in good hands potentially if he's able to stay healthy.
Really excited to see what Zion looks like because my issue has only been he's a tremendous athlete, but that body, he's going to have knee things and he's going to have ankle things. And, he might be good for a half a season and you got to sit him for. So I'm curious to see how he looks after the part. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having
appreciate
me.
you. You've now bumped Henry Hayes as our resident basketball expert. That's his title we give him. We're taking it away from him. We're giving it to you. Best of luck this season.
Thank you so much.
Jonathan
Appreciate
Pixley, the state championship coach for the Dunham Tigers, Division III winners just a few months ago. We'll be back with more Sports Shorts presented by LeBears next week. Have a good one.
Sports fans, you don't want to miss the biggest celebration of the summer. It's the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame induction weekend in Natchitoches, June 25th through 27th. The 2020 Hall of Fame class features legendary sports figures Nick Saban, Phil Robertson, and many more. Log on to lasportshall.com for more ticket information. If you're an avid sports fan, then you need to check out the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, located in historic downtown Natchitoches, next to the Chateau St. Denis Hotel and the Natchitoches Convention Center. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame is where the rich history of Louisiana sports is told through the pictures, artifacts, and by the legends themselves in video archives. Come to the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and Northwest Louisiana History Museum and visit a world-renowned architectural marvel. For more information and to purchase tickets to the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame events, visit lasportshall.com/purchase. Sports fans, you don't want to miss the biggest celebration of the summer. It's the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame Induction Weekend in Natchitoches, June 25th through 27th. The 2020 Hall of Fame class features legendary sports figures Nick Saban, Phil Robertson, and many more. Log on to lasportshall.com for more ticket information.
Can't get enough sports shorts? Tune into Sports Shorts TV on Cox HD Channel 1013 Mondays at 8, Tuesdays at 9, and ETEL Channel 4. That's 52 weeks a year to get educated on sports by the best. Joel Davis and Ronnie Rance.